it's Ducky, and in today's video we are back in the How Much Art Can You Make book by the wonderful Chantel Arts, and of course we're again doing 3 prompts today, so let's get into it. What is opposite? Create something totally different. So as usual, I have created a sketch here, so let's get into it. So for opposites, I immediately, for some reason, thought of making 2 vampire characters that are complete opposites and also are hunters. I wanted to play off as many opposites as possible, so I tried to include dark versus light, soft versus harsh, short versus tall, curvy versus thin, feminine versus masculine, new versus old, frilly versus sharp, happy versus sad, and I'm sure there are probably some others that I'm missing. I also kind of wanted to play on the opposites of like social expectations. So I feel like if you have a very butch mask character and then a very feminine character, the butch one is normally tall, grumpy, sad, and very ripped. And the feminine character is short, curvy, and overly happy. So I turned those around. My butch character, I'm naming Sage. I feel like that's very fitting with names that non-binary and trans people name themselves. And the feminine character is named Seraphine, which feels adequately vampiric, old-fashioned, and powerful. I really like all the details on Sage. I wanted to make them look very rugged and kind of brutalist. Lots of leather and textures. I gave them lots of change, which was actually really fun to draw. I kept their design very asymmetric to keep that very androgynous profile. I used lots of deep dark colours on this page, and then also used coloured pencils to add shading and also make the colours look a bit more cohesive. I used pencil in the shoulder area to try and create a bit of a faux crocodile leather kind of detail. Maybe it was made from one of the mythical creatures that they have hunted. I also made sure to use one colour on each character from the other's colour scheme. I think it really helps with the contrast and just makes them feel like a pair. I chose a light pink for Sage's hair, which is the same as the pink I used on Seraphine's dress, and then for Seraphine I borrowed the dark red I used on Sage for their hair, which you'll obviously see in a bit. I feel like Sage is maybe a couple hundred years old and is a really bubbly character, which always catches people off guard, and I can imagine that Seraphine is a much older vampire, maybe 1,000 years old, and is just incredibly cold and doesn't really do emotions very much. I feel like these 2 characters were kind of forced into interacting due to having the same creature, and Seraphine was so uninterested in anything to do with this young, happy-go-lucky vampire. But they kept being forced into a similar situation, and Sage eventually wore the old vampire down until they started to become friends, probably over the course of, say, 100 years. Seraphine probably doesn't show much emotion or affection in any kind of traditional sense, but Sage knows they care for and would die for them. I think they're very, very close, but anyone else looking at the relationship would be confused as to how they were actually friends, or maybe lovers, who knows. I can imagine if they were lovers, it was a very open thing, because I don't think anyone who's 700 years old, let alone 1,000-year-old, would be bothered by a concept such as monogamy. I wanted them both to have a weapon each, as of course they are hunters, and I wanted the weapons to feel like they matched them. So for Sage's weapon, I went for a spiky baseball bat. I wanted it to be a hybrid of a baseball bat and an old-fashioned flail mace thing, but I just couldn't get the shapes right, so I gave up on that. I did find a picture of a sword with black smoke coming off it though, and I thought it looked really cool and vampiric, so I decided to give my baseball bat a similar smoky effect. I also very loosely inspired these characters off of a very dainty chinaware, and then some very brutalist mugs and teapots. My Pinterest linked below has the inspiration boards for these if you're interested in seeing those. For Seraphine, I really wish I had tested out some colour combinations with my Ahuas before I went into colouring this in, because my vision was a very pale, ethereal vintage feel, and instead it feels a little too bright and colourful and modern with the colours I chose. I am, however, obsessed with the hair colour and style. I was very, very inspired by dressing up game I play on my phone for the way the hair falls. I've been really trying to find ways of drawing hair that I like, because I love that big flowing hair look, but I really struggle to make it look natural. I feel like doing this hair has really helped me understand the way that hair moves, in a bit of a fantasy way, of course. In a bit of a fantasy way, at least. Of course, Seraphine also needed a weapon, and I was really inspired by iridescent weapons that kind of look like they're made for angels. And I mean, maybe in this world it truly is an angel sword that Seraphine managed to somehow managed to get their hands on over the thousands of years they've been alive. The original sketch on my tablet was a lot more detailed than I was able to do on this page, but the hilt of the sword has a glowing orb surrounded by 4 angel wings. I was really proud of this design. I don't have any set ideas on what powers these vampires have in this world, but I feel like both their weapons draw on their powers in some way, hence smoke and glowing orbs. Maybe they're the only ones who are able to use these weapons to their full potential. For the sizing, I tried to make Sage look a lot shorter than Seraphine, but I feel like it just looks like I drew the characters out of scale of each other. Okay, that's that one done. On to the next prompt. Whose tattoo is this? Design a tattoo on this page. I have once again done a sketch off camera, so let's get into it. So I knew exactly what I'd be doing for this prompt because I know exactly what I want for my next tattoo, I just hadn't designed it yet. One of my best friends and one of the most important people in my life took their own life about 3 years ago. This video is actually going up about a week and a half before the 3rd anniversary, which is just weird timing. Her nickname was Toad, and so I thought it was only right to get a toad tattoo in memory of her. I don't actually know why she had that nickname. I knew she had it for a long time. I also know I did get told at one point, but I can't remember. I knew instantly that I wanted the toad to have little angel wings. I'm still unsure on the halo. I probably won't get the halo because I'm not religious in any sense. I just like angels in the kind of mythical creature kind of way. Obviously, that wouldn't fill both pages, so I've decided to do a portrait on the other side of Izzy. I'm actually incredibly happy with how well I captured her likeness. The sketch on my tablet is definitely slightly closer, but either way, I would never have been able to draw her that well before. In fact, in my suicide bereavement therapy sessions, I did draw her probably 6 months after she died, and it definitely didn't look anywhere near as close as this. She was a beautiful soul inside and out, and I miss her every day. She meant everything to me, but I was also struggling mentally, and I didn't reach out enough because I thought I was a burden. On the night she passed, I went to call her because I felt suicidal myself, and instead I felt like a burden, so I didn't. And I regret that for the rest of my life. I don't say this to get pity, I say this to tell you that you're not a burden, and you don't know how much reaching out when you're low could mean to someone else. Please make sure to keep in touch with your friends, especially if you know they're going through something. Even if you don't think they're going through something, just keep in touch. You don't know what they're hiding, especially if they're male. When Izzy died, it came as a shock. She had gone sober from drugs and wasn't really drinking. She had a stable job and she seemed so happy. When probably 4 months beforehand, she had overnight left me a voicemail telling me how that she was not going to be there in the morning. I woke up, frantically tried to call her and called the ambulance service and got them to wake her family up to find out she had passed out drunk and was fine other than a bit low. Sometimes when someone seems better, you need to keep a close eye. It's a common thing that happens, and I know I've done it myself. So I thought I knew to look out for it, and yet I was so happy to see her happy and getting better, I didn't consider what it could really mean. I regret that I only really knew her in the depths of my alcoholism myself, so my memories are not as clear cut as I would have liked. I in fact went sober 3 months before she killed herself. That being said, this is very depressing, and her memory is anything but that. She was a vibrant, beautiful person. She made me feel seen, and when we were together I felt carefree. She made me feel like a stupid teenager at times, which I never experienced as a teen. We met in a pub kitchen during COVID, during the crazy Eat Out to Help Out scheme. So I didn't know her long, but the joy she brought to my life in that time frame was something else. She felt like a part of my soul. She taught me how to be myself, how to be confident in myself, how to stop caring so much about what other people thought. She truly was the kind of person who radiated sunshine. Did she struggle massively? Yes. Did I see her at some of her lowest lows? Yes. But she's never stopped being a beautiful, caring person. Despite being in the midst of many drug addictions, she never once let me fall into those alongside her, even when I was at my lowest and wanted to. Grief is really difficult. It's hard to put it into words how much of a difference it has made to me and my life. I will always carry her memory with me. I will always feel a hole in my heart. I push to make her proud of how far I've come. Whenever I feel like giving up, especially with the mental health services in the UK, I remember her, and I remember the pain of losing her, and I keep pushing to get better, to not let the mental health services let me fall through the cracks like it did for her. It's not easy, and it never goes away. I will always feel this void she left. I don't know how it will feel in a further 3 years, 10 years. I can't think that far ahead. But I know I'm finally able to go to a gig and not break down because she would have loved it. And that's at least some progress. I still think of her every time I'm at a gig and how much she'd enjoy it, but I'm able to not let it take over. I've learnt to let grief and joy coexist. I still sometimes feel guilty when I'm happy, because she's not here, so I shouldn't feel happy. But that's just not true. I can't live my entire life in some kind of Victorian mourning period. I know the anniversary will be difficult. Well, actually, it's never the anniversary of her death. It's always the day I found out. The day after. My mum's birthday. When I opened my messenger to send a happy birthday message to her, and instead saw a message from Izzy's boyfriend, telling me he was so sorry to be telling me this. Which I hadn't had notification of on the day, because my stupid Facebook Messenger notifications only work half the time. I can't forget the day, because every happy birthday message to my mum is a reminder of that day, and of that pain. At least this year, my partner's friend's band from London is playing down here in the south, so we will be going to that, and it will help keep my mind off it. I chose a mixture of line work and pointillism for the tattoo, as that's the style my other tattoos are in, and it's my favourite tattoo style. I also really enjoyed making the frame for the portrait of Izzy. I used aspects from many tattoo frames and old fancy mirrors that I found on Pinterest to create this, and I love it. In the end, this page came out exactly as I had planned. It is very cathartic to draw, especially with the anniversary coming up, as it is weighing heavy on my mind at the moment. Okay, I'm finished with this prompt. On to the next one. What is surreal? Draw things that don't make any sense. Here is my sketch for this one. I spent a lot of time trying to think of something surreal, and I was just coming up short. Then I was scrolling on Pinterest, saw something for a split second, went to click, and accidentally refreshed the page and never to be seen again. I hate when that happens, and I know it's happened to you too. It happens to the best of us. What I saw in that brief glimpse was a snail with a clear shell, with a scene inside the snail. I don't know if it was an artist's work, photo manipulation, or AI. I didn't get a good enough look, but it gave me an idea. And I sat on a snail with a magical fairy world inside it. This one took a long time. It was so much detail, but I enjoyed every second using my new acrylic markers. My last video was a deep dive into these new markers, so if you haven't seen it yet, I'll link it below. I hadn't used my acrylic markers on my usual printer paper yet, and all I can say is that they worked perfectly. No pilling or tearing. Did it buckle my paper? Yeah, of course, it's really cheap paper. I expected that, and most wet mediums buckle it. But to be honest, it didn't buckle it much at all. I worked in layers on this piece. So first I made the background with the light coming through the forest. I went with a purple hue because that felt magical, and then I went in with trees in the distance, getting darker and thicker the closer to the foreground they were. And then I went on to the trees in the front. I wanted them to have a blue magical hue. At first I tried to make the trees brown with a hint of blue. Because these markers are opaque, that just didn't work how I was intending, so I let it dry and just made the trees blue with black and grey for shading. And I love how they come out. It's just as mystical as I wanted. Once I was in the grooves of things and knew how I wanted to do this piece, I started out with my darkest colours and then layered a mid-tone and a highlight, and then sometimes an even smaller white highlight. I love how this waterfall came out. At first it was looking proper dodgy, but I managed to fix it, mainly with the light blue and white creating the froth where the waterfall meets the pond. While none of it makes sense, I feel like the waterfall makes it feel like it makes even less sense. So I think that helps with the whole surrealism thing. I love the massive mushrooms. I think it makes the little windows and doors look even smaller and the perfect fairy size. I ended up using nearly every single marker from my set in this piece, and of course I didn't want to put any away just in case I needed to use it again, so my desk quickly became a cluttered mess of pens. Onto the snail. I really struggled at first, trying to work out how to blend the colours, because, as I've said before, the greys in this set are severely lacking, but I ended up going with a pointillism kind of vibe, and I'm so happy with how it turned out. I did end up using a lot of different shades of blue to help with the transitions of the greys, and to tie it back into the fairy world a little bit better. I'm also learning how to use other colours other than just grey and black to create shadows, and it's helping me be a bit more experimental, and I'm really enjoying that. I also made this tiny little baby snail riding on the big one's shell. When I was looking at reference pictures of snails, I came across one with a tiny baby on its shell and fell in love and had to do it. It was just too cute not to do. I really wanted to make the shell look transparent, but obviously I was really nervous about messing up the entire piece because I was so happy with how the little world came out. But I just used a white and then some super pastel colours to create that reflective effect, and I'm so happy with how it came out. Part of me does miss the fairy world without it, but I don't think it would be surreal if it was just a fairy world. That would just be fantasy, right? I don't know. I get confused about genres of everything. Art, music, films, books. For example, I spent years thinking I did not really like rock music because I thought rock music was just 80s glam rock, which I'm not a massive fan of. It turns out a lot of my favourite music is in fact considered rock, when I had just grouped it all together with metal. I just thought it was the not very heavy version of metal. And since then I have given up trying to understand music genres, especially alternative ones, because they all borrow pieces from one another, especially when you get to the sub-genres. And I just like all the music and will listen to anything anyway, except opera. How did I get on to talking about music? I don't know. Anyway, I love this piece. Oh, this is always my least favourite bit, having to decide where I cut. And that's the last prompt done. So today we made opposite vampire characters. We created a memorial tattoo for my dear friend Izzy. And we created a surrealist piece inside a snail shell. Okay, that was all 3 prompts. Which was your favourite? I don't know which was mine. I love how the vampires came out. Well, I love the concept for the vampires, but I'm not happy how the light one came out, so that one isn't necessarily my favourite. Obviously, the tattoo one has a very near and dear part in my heart, and I am very happy with it. And the snail, that was really cool as well. I love how that came out. A bit sad that I've had to cut it in half, but there's that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!